Hello YouTubers. Welcome to my review of the 4th and 5th seasons of Dragon Prince. I have cut the two from seasons 1 to 3 and seasons 4 to 5 for multiple reasons. Part of it is I am teeing up my review later this month of Attack on Titan, of which I will be doing the same thing. Cutting my review into segments, and also I feel like this content is still relevant because it did just come out 3 months ago, and on some level reviewing this next set of Dragon Prince, which is coined as Mystery of Aaravos, is unfair on some level because there's still a 6th and 7th season to come out of the same name. So I will probably come back to this once those seasons are out, but these seasons are worth reviewing, and if the chatter online is of any indication, people are less fans of these seasons than the first 3. I have my own mixed feelings. There are some aspects I think are weaker and some aspects that I actually think are done pretty well. All in all, as you'll later see when I do my Attack on Titan reviews, I do think Attack on Titan Season 4 does its narrative expansion much better, but there are still a lot of aspects to Dragon Prince's expansion that I think have good merit. So, to recap, the way I do these reviews, I look at 15 narrative tenets called A Nature of Order. Deeper detail can be found in the introduction on my channel. And then I will be giving each tenet a color ranking based on how good I feel it is. And then at the end of the review, I will average out all those colors to get an overall review of the movie. So, without further ado, let's begin. Number 1, we have levels of scale, and this is an aspect that I do think is weaker than the first 3 seasons because I give this a white. And this might just be an after effect of where our characters are now. They've navigated past the lowest levels of scale on the ground, where now they're up to maneuvering around similar players on the same level. They're like, Ezran is now the king, and we're communicating with Zubeia, the Queen of the Dragons, same level. At the same time, I think there's something missing. Like, yes, there is an element of feelings of the effects of the conflict on commoners down below in both the Sunfire Elves and the Scumport arcs. And yes, there's a feeling of the higher level threat. But the lowest levels aren't often interacting with our leads. Our leads are also able to hop from location to location much more easily now, which dilutes the physical feeling of scale. And even the titular Mystery of Aaravos feels a little flat. Like, yes, there is the mystery of where his prison is, but less of a mystery about him. Like, instead of getting Half-Blood Prince, the book version, it feels much more like a fetch questy or Game of Thrones when Jon Snow gives the same "we need to come together to stop the Night King" speech like a half dozen times. And so that higher level threat is there, but there's much more that they could have done with it, at least so far. So I'm not going to go low and de-yellow, but white feels necessary. Strong centers, also white. Because again, I gotta dock points here because at first I was excited about the sequence because I felt like we were going to get to watch our centers be inverted. With Zim, who is kind of the strong center of the first set, now kind of in the background, and the search for Aaravos, his dark shadow, front and center. And the scene when Aaravos possesses Callum is expertly well done, and you feel this threat. Excuse me. But after that, we don't really hear from him or even about him much. And because our leads are able to hop from location to location, 2 of our physical centers from the first 3 seasons, Catalyst and the Stormspire, now also feel a little flat and interchangeable. now, because the work done in the first 3 seasons at the highest level of this ever-expanding conflict with Zim representing one side and Aaravos representing the other, whilst watching different people and characters circle their own poles in relation to these sides, that saves this tenet for me yellow. And some of the character work here, like the Callum Rayla conflict in Season 4, Callum's dark magic dilemma in Season 5, the aspects of the Sunfire Elves arc that are focused on the people and not just on Kareem's bitterness, those all work. And they're connected to like center pole aspects of either balance or darkness or like that kind of stuff. But still, given the strength of this tenet in the first 3 seasons, it's somewhat of a disappointment. Boundaries. And I'm gonna give this one a green, which I gave the first 3 seasons a green too, but for different reasons. For the first 3 seasons, I felt like the strength of this category had to do with the highest level, the thematic boundaries that divide us, that our characters had to cross and bridge in an attempt to find peace, literal and thematic. Whereas in these 2 seasons, I felt like, outside of the boundaries that our characters had to cross in Number Tour, a lot of the literal boundaries were a little subpar. However, I felt like a lot of the character boundaries were just as strong, if not more so, than the first 3 seasons. The chasm that exists between Callum and Rayla in Season 4 feels legitimate, and even though I kind of wish this had been carried over into Season 5, it feels earned once they're able to bridge it. The boundary between Janai and Kareem that threatened to tear the Sunfire Elves and humans apart. The boundary that Callum doesn't want to face, that is his willingness to use dark magic when it is necessary. The boundary that exists in Viren's mind that he spends both seasons trying to work through. A lot of this is on the ground level rather than the higher level, but it feels genuinely realistic, and that averages out to a green. Alternating repetition. Like the first 3 seasons, this tenet definitely exists. This is a green, by the way. As we are typically following our heroes, Claudia's group and Amaya's group at some point during the 2 seasons. However, I felt like this tenet was a little more successful in Season 4 than Season 5. In Season 4, despite some tonal whiplash as we transition from Katalis to Zadia, it felt like the Sunfire Elf plotline was continuing the thematic essence of the first 3 episodes, of being concerned that our fragile peace will ultimately collapse, while our heroes are in their own plotline trying to fight for this peace, whilst Claudia's group, featuring a Viren that is more temperate than before, and Claudia, who whilst an antagonist is not without empathy, almost exists between the 2. So, which side are they going to land on? So the season felt fairly direct in using this alternating repetition in service of the theme. In Season 5, however, it began to get closer to just being confusing. I wasn't completely sure if Callum and Ezran were temporarily separated or fully separated early on. The Sunfire Elf plotline pops in and out more haphazardly, and because Claudia's group really isn't interacting much with the group, they felt somehow far away, as well as the tones being a little hit or miss too. Like the tones in the different plots in Season 4 felt consistent and then were allowed to interweave, whereas in Season 5, like Viren would be having a nightmare, and then it would switch over to our heroes like being cute and telling some jokes. Now, I'll give the show some props for not separateness, more on that later, but for this tenet, I think it suffers for it. But the strength of Season 4's use of it makes it a green, as opposed to a white, but not high enough to be a blue. Positive space is also green. Like the earlier seasons, the aesthetic use of positive here is well done as always, and aforementioned in levels of scale and strong centers, it felt like the higher level uses of positive and negative space were more diluted, as the characters and plots themselves seemed more unsure as to whether to lean into positive or negative space. And Aaravos being in the background despite him supposed to be the titular character of this arc, and Zim having less to do, those don't help the matter. However, like in Boundaries, I also thought there was some good uses in showing us some of our characters navigating the space between the spaces, and namely Callum, Viren, and Claudia, who it's probably no coincidence are our series mages, with the threat of dark magic and possession hanging over Callum's head, Viren spending both seasons trying to process his use of dark magic from earlier seasons, and Claudia drifting more and more towards using it unilaterally. I enjoy that as these characters are attempting to make sense of these elements, the show shows us that our preperceptions of moral positive space aren't necessarily cut and dry. With Rex Igneous, who is a dragon, and dragons should be moral positive space, ultimately turns out to be kind of an antagonist. And Finnegrin, who to me was Season 5's MVP, proving to arguably be more twisted than any of our prior villains, and he's a primal magic wielder. Again, some of the confusion as to these tenets at the highest level keeps it from a blue, but the use of this tenet across some of our characters on the ground keeps it a green. Now, good shape is a blue. It's props for Viren's arc and for actually exploring Callum and Rayla in a mature way, plus the concept of how and where dark magic is moral, or is it? The lack of a good shape in Aaravos feels like it suffers other tenets as opposed to this one, and Zim being more of a supporting character instead of the center feels okay, because we know he'll have a part to play in the later seasons. Even though his stuff in Season 4 with being reintroduced to humanity, disobeying his mom, and then confronting Rex Igneous with truths about his dad, that I liked. Even though I didn't feel like I had much to do in Season 5. I do wish that if Soren had been given more meat to chew on with regards to processing the fact that his dad is still alive, but Claudia's good shape at least partially makes up for it, with her dark magic, of course, projecting this good shape, literally, as well. Local symmetries, also blue. And this is something I'm glad to have seen in these seasons, because this is higher than I had for Seasons 1 to 3. Seeing the local symmetries across Zadia, that the dragons don't necessarily all get along, that the elves, as showcased by the Blood Moon Huntress arc, don't necessarily all get along either. The symmetries across dark magic use with regards to Callum, Claudia, and Viren. And even though it was on the nose, the symmetries that Soren plays on in the Finnegrin arc, because he first plays the role his father wanted him to play in sort of a wealthy, upstanding individual of Smort Longpocket, and then embracing his true self when he saves Deadwood and everyone, which crystallizes him being fully different than Claudia, his local symmetry from the earlier seasons. And we still have Callum, Rayla, and Amaya Janai as our core interspecies relational symmetries. And there are even local symmetries seen from Katalis to the Sunfire Elf Camp to Skumport, and showing that just because we have brought, quote, peace, people are still suffering, and some people don't even want peace. The only real reason I'm not going to bump this up to purple is because outside of the first 3 episodes of Season 4, we basically spent 0 time in the human world, and given how much buildup we spent there in the first 3 seasons, that's kind of a shame. Hopefully the last 2 seasons come back around to this. Deep Interlock is green. Good elements, especially that pulls on the earlier seasons, like Soren's backstory, like the quote, "Without Dad's magic, you wouldn't be here." And that makes us think of when he was paralyzed for an episode. The Moonshadow Elf coins, which come back. Sol Regum comes back. A good portion of Viren's backstory draws on the first three seasons. Callum's concern with dark magic draws on Season 2. However, internal elements here, like within these 2 seasons, other than the foreshadowing done with Blood of Child, repeated line by the homunculus, feel flatter. Again, more fetch questy as opposed to emergent. So the pulling on the previous season's green, but I'm not going to go higher than that. Contrast, also green, because I feel like these seasons were more about symmetries than contrast, especially since the highest level contrast of human world versus Zadia as well as Zim versus Aaravos feel like they're more in the background. Though Kareem versus Janai is a contrast, Kareem's villainy feels a touch manufactured too. That even though it does feel reasonable, it's a little over the top. We do still have Soren versus Claudia. We have Terry versus Natham, the two Earthblood Elf companions for the two different teams, as well as contrast/conflict of, I mean, the Human World versus Zadia do still percolate on the ground, even though I wish there were more of it. And I also do feel like the comedy worked better in the micro here. Even though in the macro I didn't think it was perfect, I did like the, what's it called? Intertextuality callbacks of Indiana Jones and Lord of the Rings, which happen in the Umber Tour adventure. Graded variation. Blue. Stronger than before, because the show pushes Claudia and Soren even further. Viren is more gray now than he was before. I have found Callum and Rayla to be way more mature in navigating their relationship compared to like the more innocence of the first 3 seasons, as well as the graded variation of using dark magic and Callum's relationship to it. And although I wish the show had done more with it, you do see the effect that our heroes and villains have had on the world in the Sunfire Elf Blood and Katalis in the first few episodes. If we had seen more of Katalis, maybe I could consider purple here, because as it is good stuff here overall. Because, I mean, we even got some graded variation across Zadia and across the dragons. But for what we got, blue. Roughness. Green. Because we have some societal roughness, even though I wish there was more of it. We have roughness in Callum Rayla, roughness in Viren, roughness in Claudia and Soren that are pushed forward. Roughness in the world, and I'm a fan of getting some side villains like Blood Moon Huntress and especially Finnegan. Heck, even roughness between the dragons. If anything, I'm glad to see things that I wish to see in the first 3 seasons. Like, even the damn comedic relief in Terry kills a character, which is like, that is some ice-cold roughness about how the world works. However, the only reason I'm keeping this a green and not a blue is because there are some moments when I felt like characters' decisions, key characters, were manufactured and not genuine. Soren not really reacting much to his dad's resurrection outside of the first moment was a major missed opportunity. I was okay with Zim being in the background, but outside of him being upset to Rex Igneus's taunts towards his dad, I still wish he had more to do. But mostly I felt like the mistakes that Callum and Ezran make in Season 5, Callum in going back for the books and the Great Bookery, and Ezran trying to save the Baitlings, both of which lead to horrific consequences, were manufactured for the sake of action, and also not addressed as character flaws, because there definitely would have been. At that point in Season 5, Callum and Rayla are kind of on good terms, whereas if they had been on worse terms, leading to Callum's decision, it would have made even more sense. Or if the gang had, say, chewed Ezran out, saying like, hey, you're king now, you can't go around making foolish decisions trying to save everyone anymore. And it definitely felt like that's something Callum might have said, because there seemed to be some bubbles of conflict with Callum wanting to get the Nanoblade to kill Aaravos when he comes back, versus Ezran wanting to stop Aaravos' return regardless, because he really just doesn't want violence, which is innocent but also naive. So the above roughness moments I do think outweigh these, but it's a shame because I think if some of these character mistakes had been addressed internally, I could start seeing a potential for purple here, but instead it's brought all the way back down to green. Echoes is also green. Okay, so the theme that I felt like this season was going for was the danger of fragile peace splitting apart even after we've earned it. And initially I felt like the show was doing a good job with this. So Aaravos is the representation of that danger. And we have the Callum-Rayla conflict combined with the societal conflict that starts in Katalis and then is kind of moved over thematically to the Sunfire Elves. But then, I don't know, it's like the show stopped doing this a little bit in season 5, in which outside of Callum, Claudia, and Viren all being potential symmetric echoes of dark magic, I wasn't sure which echoes I was supposed to be following. Even moments that could have really landed, like Amaya potentially getting a heroic sacrifice as an upping of the seriousness / loss of innocence, or Soren finding out about his dad to recenter his and Claudia's simultaneous yet opposite journeys, weren't pushed forward. What saves this tenet from White, though, are the side villains, because the Blood Moon Huntress shows that side things from ages-old conflicts still exists that villains and heroes can draw on, which is an echo of the above central theme of long-lost danger. And Finnegrin, most of all, shows that the danger of a kind of malice that wants to pull us apart right there on the ground level and do things simply for cruelty and control can exist in anyone, not just the high-level villains that we know of. So it's kind of weird that the two biggest echoes in season 5 were just introduced side villains, but hey, they're there, and they, as well as the above stuff, like the dark magic stuff, save this tenet from White, so green. Void, however, I have to go yellow, because the thing about Void here is that there are 2 moments, one in each season, in which this tenet lands, and lands hard, if not harder than the first 3 seasons. And that is the Claudia Ibis fight in season 4, which is cut with Ezran talking about the danger of our peace falling apart, which ends with the comedic relief committing murder, and then it's tied to the return of the fallen star, all cut to a brilliantly melancholic piece of music. And then Finnegrin's Wake, which is maybe the most disturbing episode of the entire series, which genuinely fear for our characters' lives. It ends with Callum going down the road he desperately didn't want to go down. It's like, damn. However, in each of these instances, there is a caveat, because as aforementioned, the societal fragile peace arc drifts further and further to the background over the course of the 2 seasons, after that high and that fight in 403, and Aaravos, who should be the representation of that theme, Menace and Void, after he possesses Callum, feels like he's more in the background than he was in seasons 2 and 3. So this voidy stuff that is expertly teed up in 403 is then diluted. And season 1 kind of did this too, in teeing up the central conflict with Hera's death before shifting to being more adventure-y for the rest of the seasons. But then season 2 really follows up on those earlier voidy stuff, whereas season 5 in this set kind of only does partially. As Finnegrin's Wake, you can't help but think that all of this could have been avoided if Ezran had been more responsible. And because this mistake isn't addressed, it doesn't just feel like a missed opportunity, it feels like a full misstep, which is a shame, because Finnegrin's Wake on its own, in a vacuum, again, damn. To say nothing of the Great Bookery fight and the final fight with Claudia, which still feels somewhat manufactured, the Great Bookery fight wants to be this big voidy fight in the middle of the second act, but this could have been avoided if Callum had been smarter. This isn't addressed either, and the push for thematic loss of innocence, actual character deaths, don't even happen. And the Claudia fight was better, but I would have enjoyed it more if A, Viren or Terry had gotten involved, even though the sight of Ezran calling on a school of fish to protect them was very enjoyable, and B, because Finnegrin's Wake is so disturbing, that then feels like the more dangerous trial. So then we have the Claudia fight, but it feels less dangerous than Finnegrin's Wake. And because the Claudia fight is supposed to be the main fight, it's like, it doesn't hit as well as it could have. Alright. Intercom is where I am going to dock the show for a lot of the mixed reception stuff that has been talked about, because this will be the first orange I have given out. And Intercom is where I heavily dock the points on the Aaravos story. And maybe more, given some of the tonal stuff in Season 5. So like, I thought the Dark Banthers was like a full-on Mononoke thing of like corruption at the highest level spreading across like all the lands, but no, it was just a subplot that wasn't really mentioned in Season 4. And they mentioned human infected, but where are they? And then it isn't, they don't come back to it either. Then manufactures an action scene. Like, several of the stuff feels like a one-off. Archmage Akiyu feels like a one-off. And even though in the end I love the Finnegrin stuff, again, I can't help but wonder that it only came out because of Ez, who it made sense in the first few seasons when he was more naive and innocent, but at this point he should know better. And the aspects of the positive emergence, which I did feel there were in the back half of Season 4, and beyond the Ez stuff, Finnegrin as well, I can't help but wish this one was not just stronger, but much stronger. And I'd go yellow as a baseline given all the above stuff, but the set is called The Mystery of Aaravos, and then said mystery is just told, not shown, within 4 episodes, just in an expository monologue, when they clearly had room to use either Kareem or Akiyu to emergently reveal the backstory in 505. Maybe this will be a case we'll see in seasons 6 or 7 when the sort of known lore is undercut and we find out the true mystery later on, and if that happens, I will return and change this up. For right now, I gotta do it orange, because instead of being intrigued by the immersion stuff in Season 5, because the backstory is told, you kind of spend bits trying to remember if you've been told this before or not, and that's no fun. It is not enough to break the experience, but it is the lowest aspect of this set. But not separateness is blue, and that is, for the first 3 seasons I gave this aspect to white, and I'm going much higher here. As a baseline, I think this is more greeny, especially in Season 4. There is a not separateness to the Catalyst mini-conflict as well as the Sunfire Elves plot, both after effects of the fragile peace and linked to the main theme of peace falling apart. And then the sequence of Callum's group and Ezran's group being separated in the first half of Season 5 worked for me this time. I'm not fully sure if I'm happy not seeing a sort of temporary goodbye scene to tee up the separation, nor am I sure if I like Callum and Rayla teleporting back to Catalyst just for Rayla to investigate the old dungeons in one scene and then going back to Zadia. But the balance of this not separateness worked. Because at the end of Season 2, it felt like our characters were separating for a long time and then are very quickly brought back together. Whereas here in Season 5, it feels like it should be a temporary separation, given that they each have smaller missions to do in relation to the greater mission, and then they're going to come back together. I could probably dock the show points here for making the human world versus Zadia feel more condensed than it did before, but given that there was not separateness here that I wished for in Season 3, I was here for it. But mainly, what boosts this from a green to a blue is Soren versus Claudia. Because even though I wish Soren had a larger reaction to his dad being resurrected, you still feel Viren's influence on both of his kids. And you still feel Soren versus Claudia as 2 different, ever-evolving polarities who yet are still fully not separate as a result of their upbringing. To say nothing of the not separateness of the callum rayla conflict, for sure, because the entire thing is that there is hurt, there is pain, they are angry with each other, but you cannot escape the not separateness of the bond of the earlier seasons. So, could there have been more? Sure, but for a lot of aspects in this area, I do think they've improved on the first three. Give it a blue. Alright, so to recap, we have levels of scale, white, strong centers, white, boundaries, green, alternating repetition, green, positive space, green, good shape, blue, local symmetries, blue, deep interlock, green, contrast, green, graded variation, blue, roughness, green, echoes, green, the void, yellow, intercom, orange, not separateness, blue. And overall, for Dragon Prince, seasons 4 and 5, The Mystery of Aaravos, overall, I'm just giving it a green. And what I find interesting about this, because if we remember I gave the first 3 seasons a light blue, we see the disparity between these 2 sets of seasons. In one set, the earlier seasons, you see a set that maybe has its characters a little more simpler, and the bulk of its roughness and shades of gray are at the highest level. But ultimately, it is a wholly centered, focused, and less wobbly set. Whereas this set arguably has better character work amongst its leads, better shades of gray, and symmetries at the ground level, better side villains, and better extrapolations of some of the world, with a theme that is more gray, and thus also more mature. And yet, it is a set that feels less focused, is much more wobbly, and has more moments that make you shake your head. So it shows that sometimes simple really is better. Even though that, contrary to a lot of the criticisms already out there related to these 2 seasons, it's absolutely not enough to call them bad. They indeed push the characters forward, for the most part, and make them grapple with a good amount of mature stuff. Looking to see if the last 2 seasons can push these elements to their natural conclusions. Judging by Finnegrin's Wake as an example, I have more confidence than I do not. Even though, you'll see when I review Attack on Titan, you do the expanded narrative after the initial set, you have the potential for super high colors, super high mature stuff, super high roughness, and this is an area where the set is still good, but we all know it could have been more. So, alright, and before I leave for these sets, I like to list my color memories, which are the highlights of the experience, which I usually do a sort of rolling ranking from blue, purple, light purple, and purple. And I'm going to bang these through pretty fast because it is a TV show, there's a lot of them. So, blue memories, I did like Viren with PTSD. Even a lot of people think that was too much of a shift for him. I think it showed consequences in the first 3 seasons and teed up what actually was a decent character arc. I like the Sunfire Elf Tribunal in 406. Some of the Korean stuff was on the nose, but this was an area that really you felt the human to elf tension maybe at its highest of this plot line. And also you see what a responsible leader in Janai, what one needs to do in such a situation. 407, I really like the Indiana Jones callback and the Lord of the Rings moment. Maybe it's kind of hokey intertextuality, but I did think this was well done. And as a spade of comedy, it's easy to do this stuff poorly, and these were areas that it was very subtle callbacks, wasn't overt about it, but if you spotted it, you spotted it, and it made me smile. Next, the early separation in Season 5. This is what I wanted to see more of in Season 3. Callum and Ezran on different quests, and in this set I felt like it mined that out enough to where you felt the aspect of it, even though I would have liked some scene that would have teed up this separation. Then in 504 I liked seeing the return of Sol Regum. That's a nice moment of deep interlock, and it's highlights because he, in terms of the symmetries across dragons, he is maybe the dragon that is the most cruel. So we'll see what happens if he gets reawakened in Season 6. And then in 506, I really liked Scumport. I also like that with Zubeia injured, now they're sort of forced to walk again, and you get to see more of the ground. But I really like that it now shows the sort of super ground level in Zadia, and you see sort of how the other half live, even though this is supposed to be this magical place, but there's still crime and thievery and bad characters out there. And then in 507 I liked, even though I do think Amaya should have died in 505 or 504, I do like that she returns just as Janai is taken, so it undercuts that sort of gray feeling of narrative tension, which I was a fan of. Moving up to blue-purple memories. Rayla being gone in the first 2 episodes, is played seriously, is played for mystery, and the lingering effects of this last across the entire season. So I respect the show for playing this seriously, and it fits the characters too. 407. I like seeing Sora and Claudia again. I read online some people wanting more from this scene, but I think they mined a good bit of good stuff out of this. They have sort of polar differences and sort of symbolic arguments. The only area I would have wished more of is more response from Drake being alive, but that's kind of separate from this scene itself. Then Rex Igneous. I, again, liked seeing symmetries across the different dragons. I like that he draws on this historical relationship to Avizandum. I like that it got a character response out of Zim, and I liked that he can't get past his anger in the end. So it was some nice shades of gray. Leading from that, Zubeia versus Rex Igneous, a great moment showing the power and authority that Zubeia commands. And I was a fan of that. In 504, I liked the speech that Amaya gives Rayla, and this was when I really thought it was being telegraphed that Amaya was about to die, as you sort of symbolically share your lesson with the lead and transfer your symbolic, symmetrical relationship from one to the other. But even on its own, I thought it was great because it crystallized that not separateness of you can do this and do that, but you can't run away from the bond that is there, and that's an important message to say. 506 I loved. Smort Long Pocket. That was Soren is the comedic center of these 2 seasons, and this is him at his best, I think. Yeah, it was just some great stuff. Made me laugh several times. And then the Janai, Kareem, Amaya, Kim Dael confrontation in 508, I thought it was a nice bit of historical aspects played into it. Nice sort of Mexican standoff kind of thing going on, and it isn't fully resolved, so we'll see where it goes in the following seasons. It was also a good cliffhanger. So, moving up to light purple, 404, Callum is possessed. In some ways the highlight of Aaravos in the entire 2 seasons, but in this moment, hey, it is played seriously, it is played dark, it is played with danger, and you feel all of it. So, this is very well done. 409, Rayla versus Claudia. This was nice build up to this, a nice moment of deep interlock, bring back the Moonshadow Elf coins, and also a nice moment showing that Claudia's empathy does still exist in there. And a nice shade of gray for her character. In 502 and 503, Viren's dreams, the whole aspect of it, going back in his backstory, drawing on the fact that he was more of a conflicted anti-hero in the first 3-ish episodes of the first set, and really pushing the fact that he was at least a great character, and really does a lot of work in making you not hate him. And given how evil he kind of leaned into in season 3, that's no small task. So, and to say nothing of the great deep interlock and good shaped character stuff going on there too. It's just good stuff going on there. Same along with it, Viren refusing to kill the homunculus in 509. That we don't know if he's going to be revealed to be dead at the start of season 6, but in a lot of ways that could in many ways complete his character arc of him just saying no more. And then at the very end, Claudia losing a leg combined with Viren lying down and accepting death was like, you see Viren reaching acceptance as you see the symbolic representation of the consequences of his choices and what Claudia has become. So that landed. Some of the build up to it I wish were a little stronger, but that as the ending, chef's kiss, yes. But highest of this set, my purple memories, already aforementioned, the Claudia Ibis fight, cut with Ezran's speech, crystallized this theme of the fragile peace potentially coming undone, and it lands wholeheartedly, and there's nothing else to say. It's just the comedic relief, committing murder. It's not played for laughs at all, it's just as serious as hell, and I wish there was more of this in the 2 sets. And then, finally, Vinegar's Wake, similar thing. Played seriously, you feel the danger, you feel the thematic elements of this happening on the ground, and this could be coming from anyone. Add the pull of dark magic on callum. So, yeah, those are the 2 biggest voidy moments of the 2 seasons, and they were great, even though I wish there were more of them. So, those are my thoughts on this 2-season set, at least for now, before I will inevitably come back to this, I think, once season 6 and 7 come out, because we'll see if any of this changes. But for now, it's worth exploring, seeing that just because you can narratively expand your initial set doesn't mean it automatically will be better, even if you can then give your characters more shades of gray. And up next, I will be diving into Attack on Titan, in which there are also arguably multiple sets of seasons, only this one in the expanded set, I think, does it spectacularly. So, thank you for listening. Hope you do give this set of seasons a chance if you haven't watched it. It has some issues, but despite what the internet says, it is not wholly bad. It just could have been better, and there are a lot of good aspects. So, thank you for listening. I'll see you on the other side. Cheers.